This is Defacto Review, where we run down the top events from the previous week and then debate what happens next. Hi, I'm Terrence Edwards, and with us tonight is our host, Jargal Defacto. How are you, Jargal?
Good evening, Terrence. So let's start our 4 topics we have selected for this week.
Sure, let's see what we have to discuss.
Mongolia seeks multiple bailout options. Has government subsidized mortgage lending hit a dead end? Former Prime Minister Sukhbatir Batbolt linked to offshore accounts in the Bahamas. Mongolians to hit the polls again in October for local elections.
We apologize for the technical difficulties. This is live TV, and sometimes we hit some speed bumps along the way. Let's get started. Mongolia will use 2 or 3 sources for cash to sidestep economic disaster as it attempts to manage a runaway depreciation of the tugrik and looming deadlines for debt repayment. Mongolia has a standby agreement with the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, in addition to potential loans it can take from partner nations. Mongolia has about 1.8 trillion tugrik in its budget deficit, while currently projecting 1.4% GDP growth for the year. International organizations such as the IMF, however, estimate less than 1% or near flat growth for the year. This would not be Mongolia's first time taking what's essentially a bailout from the IMF. Can you run down the history of Mongolia has and how Mongolia's past experiences with IMF crisis assistance in the past has gone?
In 2009, in that crisis, we had to go with IMF standby program.
Okay.
And that helped to pay state budget deficit. But soon after, the prices for coal and gold, copper go up, and we slowly go out from the economic crisis.
So you didn't take the entire assistance?
Not completely. They have taken, but overall, the standby program was implemented successfully.
Sure.
And at the same time, the prices went up, which gave a good chance to get fixed the economy. But this time is different because we have a very hardly indebted.
Okay.
And now, really, as you said, either they ask international organizations to help, like IMF, like last time, or they ask some other sources, or maybe some other governments to help.
Yeah.
But the issue is, in principle, it is the same approach to make more borrowing and to pay debt by debt. It is not the principal solution. So, and meanwhile, state keeps borrowing. I have found out that for last only 10 days, government went back to domestic borrowing, and they have managed it through the sales of 11 or so times since October 16th to 23rd September 16th to 23rd. They have succeeded to sell from 28 to 52 weeks term government bond to commercial banks.
Okay.
That's the Bank of Mongolia.
These are treasury bills.
Treasury bills, and sold total 440 billion tugriks at the rate of 16 to 17%, which is way high.
Yeah. And
basically, they took away from commercial banks their deposits, the cash, 440 billion Mongolian tugrik bond.
It's pretty high, but only a few points higher than the policy rate.
Well, the policy rate also, there was another sale, this time bill of the Mongol bank bills. They sell a 1-week bill it means for a week, but the rate was plus minus 1 to the policy rate, which is 15%.
Yeah, which
So-
was just set some weeks ago.
Yes, so altogether some 660 billion tugriks from Mongolian banks went to government and to the Bank of Mongolia, which decreases the possibility of borrowing money to businesses. If they will borrow now, or they will give a loan to businesses at the level of 20%, because now 17% you get the interest rate without any risk. So commercial banks, the government is now attracting more cash to itself to pay their bills, particular salary. And nothing to say about the interest rates. That is, you talked about just the 1.8 billion tugriks deficit in budget. So all this money goes like to the government again. Now, in these conditions, either they borrow from international organizations or borrow other countries. The issue is who is cheaper. Today, the Mongolian bonds, sovereign wealth funds, now sold at 10% about. So less than 10% we cannot attract foreign money, which would be very expensive, more than 10%.
That's our sovereign bonds.
Sovereign bonds price. So now I think until Mongolia finds a way of exporting some goods, of course, good mining products are okay, but resources are okay, but still some other products to be sold on export, which is possible only through free competition. And through competition is only possible when the prices are not regulated or restricted by the government, like now. I understand with energy, because we have monopoly sources, we cannot do immediately free price. But for many other things, including diesel fuel and other gasoline, many prices, the things should go free. Otherwise, the prices not only means of changes of goods and money and other services, but it's like a market information. When that is wrong information, it's very hard for businesses to compete. So that's my take. And the government has to borrow. There is no other ways.
Just to add one thing to what you mentioned, you talked about Mongolia's treasury bills versus the sovereign bonds. When it comes to those treasury bills, the one saving grace is at least it's denominated in the tugrik, whereas the Mongolia's sovereign debt gets more expensive almost daily as the tugrik depreciates.
Correct.
So, looking at partner nations, Mongolia could maybe take out a loan from a development bank or some other kind of assistance bank from a neighboring country such as China. That's the most likely suspect. Who else do you see maybe lending a helping hand?
No, I think this economy and this country had reached the level that it can pay back any debt. If we borrow more money, it is very hard with the current economic structure and political governance quality. It will be very hard to pay back more debts. So those countries or institutions which will come with less stricter conditions will be the #1 candidates, as you said. And most probably in that terms, China would be the best candidate to borrow money cheaper, faster, and bigger. My only concern is if we don't change our character, behavior, economic behavior, political decisions that promotes economic behavior better, that will be just another larger and deeper debt burden.
Yeah, an addiction to debt would not be a good thing. So Mongolia better just go cold turkey, perhaps.
Exactly.
Moving on, Mongolia may be able to continue its 5% subsidized lending for home mortgages, according to the Cabinet Secretariat Minister. The injection in activity from banks lending at 8% and 5% helped keep the economy afloat in recent years, with 3.8 trillion tugrik in loans issued since the start of the program in 2013. The new government, under Mongolian People's Party Prime Minister Jargoltolga Erdembat, has suspended that 5% lending, while attempting to deal with the economic challenges of today. So, Can you just explain to our audience how these 8% and 5% mortgaging works?
Well, this is one of these utopic projects that Mongolian government was running from last time since 2012. They believe that printing money and borrowing this to a bank, which will give to ordinary people who want a mortgage loan at the level of 8%. But the government gives that printed money at 5% to the banks. So 3% is their operational cost. 8% is way 2 times cheaper and lower than the commercial rate of a loan for Mongolian commercial banks. So the idea was to support people to buy houses, and to construction companies to build more houses, and the construction materials company to deliver more materials. So they have supplied money to 2 sides, supplier and demand side. But what happened was, as soon as they have announced that so-called mortgage 8% rate, the building housing prices went up twice. So the country had ended up paying the people who had 85,000 people who got houses, apartments. They got almost 2 times expensive houses, apartments with 2 times less than market rates. So from the end, if you see, is it better to have cheaper things twice more with rate, or twice expensive things twice more, twice less interest rates? That's the situation. And this program is not sustainable. And yet this government keep promising that they will do it, though actually nothing is happening. They are saying that because their political campaign promises was to continue that project.
It was quite popular.
Yeah, quite popular, and in a lot of cases people don't completely understand what is under the current situation of that loan, which is expensive houses. It is helping construction companies to sell houses which is way expensive than the market can afford. Today we have 33,000 apartments ready, waiting for customers, and we have yet 80,000 families looking for apartments. So that's how far this demand and supply missed in Mongolia.
There's a tremendous mismatch.
And it is very bad, but if there was not such a policy, which helped a lot, I think banks and brokers have some money. If it was not that program, I think housing prices, apartments went down already 2 or 3 times by now. And the normal market situation will correct. And we will be having by this time, of course, the owners maybe are changed, but sellers are changed maybe, but overall, these apartments could be already sold if it will go normally. But yet, this government wants to continue because their promise is this program, which is bringing more and more foreign debts, foreign and domestic debts. The good example is just now I have mentioned about 600 billion tugriks were taken out from bank deposits to the government and Bank of Mongolia.
Okay. And in your opinion, as far as putting families into homes, has the program been a success?
Yeah, at first glance, sounds very good. 85,000 people got 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom apartments. It's okay. But the prices were, if it was a free price, it could be cheaper. That's what I'm telling you. And secondly, it is at the cost of whole nation. Everybody who has house or not have house, all pay for that state support, because the money you cannot. When you print a lot of money, then through inflation, through increase the price, everybody pays. So that's what's going on now. And what I'm saying is, if there were not such a prices, it was normal supply and demand curve and meeting point of prices, then this price could go way down. That's what I mean. And there are more people than 85. I think over 100,000 people could have apartments now.
One of the key criteria to getting these loans is people had to be buying newly built or to soon be finished apartments. So I think that's what's really contributing to this supply glut, because people were only buying new apartments when there were plenty of apartments already on the market. But the government liked this because it kept economic activity chugging along.
True.
What's unfortunate is now we have families, specifically in UB, from these GARE redevelopment programs, and they've been waiting so long for their apartments to be built. They're essentially been living with family for months and months. Some people essentially homeless, living in some kind of subsidized apartments.
Over 400 families are staying in that situation.
Yeah.
And recently this new leadership of the city with the Minister of Construction, they decided to rent apartments to these people.
Yeah.
And the program is also in other cities as well. And government buys houses and then they rent to certain people who need, which was long-awaited step. It could be done way before now. But good thing is they started, but the faith of many those families who left their khasha fence for hoping that they will have new apartments are now still staying homeless or with some relatives, and it's a cold winter comes. This is another big social issues. You are right. That's what the city is facing.
Moving along to politics. Another leak naming the owners of offshore accounts has included former Prime Minister Sukhbater Batbolt, linking him to an account in the Bahamas. About 1.3 million accounts were included in the leak first reported on by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. This follows similar links in past years and earlier this year that linked offshore accounts to Mongolian politicians such as Sengajel Bayraktar, who is a former Minister of Finance and a former Minister of the Cabinet Secretariat. Batbolt served as Prime Minister from 2010 to 2012. So, just to look at offshore accounts as an entity, does it necessarily mean that the former Prime Minister actually did anything illegal by having this account in the Bahamas?
Well, there was a statement by his company he founded, Altai Holding.
Okay.
And the statement says that the Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister Batbolt, had these accounts before he became Prime Minister. He was a CEO of his own company, Altai Holding Group, which had some shares of Baro Gold, just that time gold, placer company. And this transaction was connected with that part of his past before he became high-ranking political officials. That was the explanation, and also in German newspaper it also says in that way. Actually the issue is not whether you can have or cannot have an account abroad, offshore, onshore, whatever. I mean, it is not the issue. You may have any account anywhere as you can. Doesn't matter, on the moon, on the whatever. It is a private issue. But however, for political officials, if they don't declare that account, in particular the transactions through that account in their annual income statement, that's criminal act. So they should be charged. I believe in this case it is not the one. But however, we do demand that income statement to be correct, because corruption is the issue of Mongolian government. We need not only income statement of a year of all politicians. We now need the expenses report too, because they spend way larger than their income can afford. So question is where the money comes from. So this is the basis of corruption and major source of the corruption is the financing of political parties. Through donations, people buy public seats, high-ranking seats. So until we end that phenomena, we cannot finish corruption in this country. On another note, we have in Mongolia a law that punishes the person who gives bribe and the person who receives bribe. Both. But we not now need to just one of them to punish it. Though the person who receives as a public officer a bribe, that guy should be punished. Then we will disclose, I think, many bad cases that boosts corruption in the society.
As I understand it, Parliament may be receiving a bill that would essentially ban public officials from holding offshore accounts. Is this appropriate, or is this going too far in your opinion?
Well, one issue government can stop that or cannot. But the issue is we even cannot check it until the sort of Panama Papers or Bahamian offshore accounts, etc. The sort of bigger paper leaks of information don't come, we cannot find it. The issue is only they should report correctly. If they have not correctly reported and we find out it will be criminally charged. That's the issue. And just by stopping or allowing or forbidding to do any action is not effective as we would believe. But however, it's at a moral harassment, moral kind of judgment, it would be more working than any other things. Otherwise, we will spend a hell of money for controlling all these rules and regulations, whether it is implemented or not. So the major issue is transparency in Mongolian governance, which is, by the way, main source of our economic misery, economic crisis.
I think the whole point of transparency is just to put all the cards on the table. But when one MP or a public official decides that they're not going to disclose it, I think the automatic reaction from people that read about it is, what are you trying to hide? I think that's the question that's really upsetting people.
That's the logic behind of reporting their annual income. So that's why we want them also report their annual expenses.
Yeah. For our final story, we look at the local elections. Mongolia will hit the polls for the second time this year in October to choose their local officials. This year, 14,489 candidates will run for office as members of 9 parties, a single coalition, or as one of the 723 independents. There are 7,282 open seats to represent Mongolia's local districts. This year will also include another short campaign season that will run from October 1st to the 17th. So, compared to the national elections, what's at stake at this local election coming up?
Actually, this is more important than the national
More
election.
important.
More important because these are people it's kind of expression of direct democracy. And people now, community level, they make now decisions who will represent them. So it's very key important for Mongolian development issue, which always underestimated in the country somehow. And we have total 1,613 BAG, which is community in rural areas. For example, one IMAG, some, then some might have 10 or so BAGs. And I think this is the community center of development.
So this is just an electoral unit, this BAG?
Not only, this is just, I think, the development lowest unit.
Yeah, okay.
Where community can cooperate together transparently. And they will see the result immediately from their communication. If you wish, it's just in Western terms, it is like a village, okay, of the people. They run things, the governance, transparency. And it's important to have that co-working together, which we have not achieved it yet in Mongolia. In city, Ulaanbaatar city and other cities, the horo is that unit out of several houses, apartments.
Instead of the BAG.
Yeah, make together one horo. And that horo, the way they live, the environment they live, they decide at that level. So those representatives are being elected. So that's why it's important for Mongolian development of not only democracy, but the community. Secondly, the head of that unit, bag or community or the horo, they have fixed salary. At least it is guaranteed salary. Many people mostly we used to have mostly people who either senior people or women or kind of quite discriminatory approach was there, unfortunately, to this level before. But now things are changing, and hopefully we will have a great leader in the community at that level. So we are expecting that election, unfortunately, every year the turnover is less, people give less importance to that level of local election. And another important matter here is before these people were kind of representing political parties, which is changed under the initiative of the President Ilbek, that law which if there is under 3,000 people living in that Samo, then the bugs and their representatives will not be representing political parties, which is a great thing, because at that level we don't need any political, military, whatever, so other higher ranking units or institutions that will dictate or push upon these people certain conditions. I think the core of democracy is this unit, community, and at the community level, their leader and their representative should be truly their people. Doesn't matter what political belief he has, it should be the key work is for them, the interests of his community.
I'm going to let you have the final word right there because we're out of time.
All right. We are going to, we're trying to present you independent on politicians and any political parties, government views on things happened last week in Mongolia, and hopefully we are outreaching you, and we also do it Facebook live streaming for people living abroad. And since it is so far live English comments on the events, so we hope we have more communication with you, and we will have more advice from you how to make it better. And a week from now, we will be 3 of us, and so that we have different perspectives on the issues and more open discussions. Please be a part of it. It will be tomorrow on generaldefacto.com live, and link, so please comment on that. Thank you very much for spending an evening with us. Have a good evening.
Good night, Ulaanbaatar.
Thank you.